He was arrested every time he got to the sidewalk and put back in jail and made to make bond 7 times back to back. To the last time he was simply reduced to sitting on the stairs and crying. He was no longer an effective activist. And there was no need to gather evidence. There's no need to have a plausible case. All you want to do is get these guys locked up until they cannot make bail anymore, and then they'll sit in a cell waiting for trial. They will have served a sentence before you walk in and dismiss the charges. More serious case, you really need to take somebody out. You fabricate evidence and you go to trial to obtain a conviction fraudulently. Good example of that, Geronimo G. Jaga Pratt just came out of prison 1997, having spent 23 years in maximum security for the so-called tennis court murder in Santa Monica, California. Okay? Really ugly case. Pratt didn't have a thing to do with it. Pratt had an interesting defense. He said, I couldn't possibly have done the murders, you see, because they happened in Santa Monica. And at the time they happened, I was in Oakland. Oakland is more than 300 miles away. Now, I'm a highly decorated Vietnam veteran, and I'm a goddamn good shot. But neither me nor anybody else I know of can take a .45 caliber Colt automatic and shoot a woman on a tennis court in Santa Monica standing 330 miles away in Oakland. Well, that's a nice story, Mr. Pratt, but how would you suggest that you might verify the fact that you were in Oakland? He said, that's very simple. See, I'm a member of the Central Committee of the Black Panther Party. And the FBI has been electronically surveilling the Central Committee of the Black Panther Party for the last 2 years. You pull their electronic surveillance records and it'll show that I was sitting in Oakland, California the night in question. And an FBI agent went on the stand and said, we're engaged in no such surveillance. And he was duly convicted and sentenced to serve mandatory life in prison. In 1975, the church committee hearings, it comes out that the FBI was indeed bugging and wiretapping Panther headquarters in Oakland. And so Pratt's attorneys on appeal go to the judge and say, they perjured themselves, number one, but more importantly, we got the exculpatory evidence to demonstrate conclusively not that there was a technical problem with the case related on FBI perjury, although that's an issue too, but rather actual innocence. And the judge says, well, that would seem to be true. And he instructs the FBI to go and pull the appropriate June logs, that's what these things are called, and they go away for several months. And even the judge is beginning to become irritable at a certain point. Okay, finally the FBI comes in and he says, what's the story? He says, we're really embarrassed, the agent says. We're really embarrassed because we indeed have June logs for the Black Panther Party headquarters in Oakland for period 1967 to 1972, and we have all of them except for this 1 2-week period that we seem to have lost. Of course, the courts are not exactly clean in this. Now, in any normal case, that would have been an instantaneous remand for retrial, if not an absolute dismissal with prejudice, and he'd walked out of prison. But since the FBI couldn't or wouldn't produce the logs, they decided to let the conviction stand, and he went on to serve another 17 years after that, denied parole on the basis, and anybody out there that thinks that there's any confusion on the part of the police who were involved in this, or the prosecuting attorneys, or anyone else in the government side of thing, denied parole on the basis that was articulated by LA Assistant District Attorney Diane Visani at his 5th parole hearing when he was denied. She said, you cannot let this guy out of prison. See, he's still a political man. And if you freed him, he's still got a constituency out there and would be able to resume the activities that put him here in the first place. Now, I thought he was in prison for murdering a school teacher on a tennis court in Santa Monica. No, she just said it straight out. He's in prison because he was an effective Panther organizer in Los Angeles, the last one they had left, and when they got G, the LA Panthers disappeared. LA Panthers, incidentally, were very effective at organizing certain street gang criminal entities like the Schlossens, 5,000 members strong. Head of the LA Panthers before Pratt was Bunchy Carter until he was assassinated. He was a Schlossen. He was bringing 5,000 street gang members into the Black Panther Party. They also, well, actually you saw the evidence of that in the emergence of a rather interestingly titled little organization. It was a splinter group of the Schlossens, something called the Crips. I mentioned them before. Everybody responded as if you'd heard of Crips. Crips. The Crips and the Bloods, the main street gangs, the gangbangers in LA. You know what Crips stands for? Common Revolution in Progress. Yeah, this was the politicized element of things, but they got the message, as they did in Chicago and the Peace Donation and so forth, that if you were going to be a politico, if you're going to actually try to work for the community, if you're going to try to change a structural reality imposed by the state, you're going to end up like Bunchy Carter in your grave. Or you're going to end up like Geronimo Pratt doing a life sentence for something you had nothing to do with. That the costs of political engagement in a constructive fashion are prohibitive in individual terms. But if, on the other hand, you simply want to be a gangbanger, if you want to be a drug importer, if you want to be a distributor and make money, fine. Fine. It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. The question you have to ask yourself if you're a 17-year-old ghetto resident in South Central Los Angeles in 1971-72 is based on your understanding of the concrete reality that's just been presented to you. Which choice are you going to make? You want to stay alive, make money, have a good time, or you want to be dead real soon? Function of the police and the function of the prison, and they dovetail very well together. That's a maintenance of order situation. There's other directions that we could take this. I guess the final one that needs to be mentioned in terms of the inventory of techniques applied by the political police to prevent political deviation and consequent social change that goes in a constructive direction rather than in a direction that is dictated by the managers of the now emergent global economy would be outright political assassination. And there, of course, are a number of variations on that theme, but probably the clearest single case on record would be Fred Hampton and Mark Clark in Chicago, Panther leaders of Chicago and Peoria, Illinois, respectively. Okay? There you have an arms squad, a special unit working for the state's attorney in the city of Chicago, coordinated by the FBI, equipped with automatic weapons, sent to an apartment on Monroe Street in Chicago in the pre-dawn hours of 4th of December, 1969. It is the apartment, the residence, basically a crash pad that is rented in the name of Fred Hampton. Hampton resides there, and whoever is engaged in a particular project he's working on or traveling through, traveling dignitaries of the Black Panther Party will be staying there as well. And you have the chief of security of the Chicago Panthers, who is for the most part resident to the apartment. The chief of security for the Chicago Panthers was a paid provocateur working for the FBI, who slipped Fred Hampton a dose of Seconal at about 11 p.m. the night before the raid. So at 4 in the morning, when they hit the apartment, he's absolutely comatose, a stationary target. The infiltrator has also provided to his FBI handler, who has then provided it to Sergeant Daniel Groth, the head of the arms squad of the state's attorney's police, a floor diagram with the locations of the furniture penciled on and an X marked in the location of Hampton's bed where Hampton can be anticipated to be sleeping. So they kick in the door at 4 o'clock in the morning, and you got this guy, Mark Clark, who's a defense captain from Peoria. He's been up engaged in political discussions with the committee in Chicago. He's sitting in a chair on guard. He's got a shotgun across his lap. And is immediately shot with an M1 carbine from 6 feet away by a Chicago police officer by the name of Gloves Davis. Shoots him twice in the chest, killing him instantly, and unleashes the only shot fired by the Panthers that night. In his death spasm, Clark pulls the trigger in a shotgun and fires a round into the ceiling as he's fallen over dead. They then proceed through the apartment, shooting everyone but one person in it. Now, the Hampton situation gets to be very interesting, because the way they shoot Hampton, brave boys that they are, is by standing in the adjoining bedroom. They know exactly where the bed is situated, where he should be lying on it, because they got the diagram and they got the X. And so a machine gunner by the name of Carmody, Ed Carmody, stands on the other side of the wall and fires an entire 50-round magazine of .45 caliber ammunition straight through the wall, the length of the bed. And then two guys go in, Carmody and another cop go in to Hampton's bedroom, where his 9 months pregnant fiancée is about hysterical, throw her out of the room into the kitchen and examine Hampton, who somehow or another, the bed, you can see in the photographs that are taken by the investigators after the fact, the bed is absolutely shredded. Hampton has one bad chest wound. So that precipitates a discussion. One says, that's Fred Hampton, right? The other one says, right. So, well, how is he? Well, he's hit bad, but it looks like he might make it. There's then a loud thump. As it turns out, they caught him by the wrist and dragged him out of the bed. 2 gunshots in rapid successions. And Carmody's voice comes out saying, well, the son of a bitch is good and dead now. And indeed he was. He had 2 bullet holes here. Okay? That's the elimination of what Noam Chomsky has called the brightest and highest potential leader in the Black Panther Party. This is what happened to Fred Hampton, who was organizing people in Maxwell Street in the south side of Chicago. We're talking what are conventionally referred to as the Skid Row bums of Chicago. Well, these Skid Row bums, as they're called, have potential if you approach them correctly, because Hampton, age 20, had gotten them off of Maxwell Street and into the basements of churches on the north side, not the south side of Chicago. South side's the black side. No, he had these guys working in the north side, servicing children, serving them the grits and eggs in the Breakfast for Children program. Well, think about that one, who it was they just eliminated here. The surviving Panthers, including the fiancée, Deborah Johnson, were then taken downtown and booked for attempting to murder the police. Yeah. And the standoff on that was, well, we'll drop prosecution against them if you won't bring prosecutions against the cops, which ultimately was never done. Although you have a civil rights suit that's filed by People's Law Office in Chicago that drags on for a dozen years, and finally the government admits that it's true and pays a few $1,000,000 of U.S. taxpayer funds to the survivors and the families of the deceased, and the case is closed. But you have an official acknowledgement there that in fact, what it was that I just described to you was essentially the way it went down. Okay, that's the nature of the process.